television. Okay, I got it. Sorry, it's telling me I'm recording. It is, he had an Android television, and he took an Android app written for a phone and he loaded it on his TV, and sure enough, a ransom note popped up. Now, I don't think anybody on the call can probably read it. It's in Russian, right? But it's definitely a ransom note. Take my word for it. So technically, it was possible, right, to get ransomware on there. And in fact, a reporter for PC World accidentally infected his machine. He got a racing app and that worked on the phone. And he said, well, that'd be fun to play on the TV. So he loaded it on his TV, and then he couldn't get it off. And he did what every good reporter would do. He turned it into a story, right? So there's a big story, and everybody was worried about ransomware getting onto other devices, or IoT. And in fact, our research Candid went back and said, well, I put it on television. I wonder if I can put it on an Android watch. And sure enough, he could. He took the racing game and he put it on his phone, and that little file also ran on the phone, and he could turn that into the ransom note popped up on his screen as well. Okay, so why didn't this take off, right? If I couldn't have my phone, or I couldn't have my watch, or my television, for God's sakes, I'd pay anything, right? Well, first of all, on the phone, of course, your backup is pretty good. So you can just reset things, and you can do these to the other devices. But here on a television or a watch, where do you pay the ransom, right? Where do you enter? Where do you pay it? Where do you put in the key, right? And certainly at the time, televisions didn't have it so easy to type something in. And on your watch, it'd be almost impossible, even if you did give you some sort of keyboard on that watch. So you couldn't practically do it. And the harder you make it to pay the ransom, the less people that are actually going to pay for it. So this just didn't work. And we haven't seen these. Now, could they come back some other time? Maybe. We don't like to give the bad guys ideas. I always think maybe, you get on a router. There's a lot of bad things you can do. Maybe that's it. But you still have where do you show the ransom message? How do you pay it? The more complicated it is, the less likely as a bad guy you're going to get paid. And I'll show you some examples of how they tried to deal with that in the PC space in a minute. All right, so IoT devices, what have we seen there? It's mainly they're used for denial of service attacks. They're generally running an older version of Linux. And yes, there's Linux malware out there. You get on there and you can do whatever you want on the machine. Mostly what's happening, although we've seen a little bit of ransomware on Linux servers, mostly it's just running denial of service attacks from there. All right. Final evolution, or into the modern day. This is what ransomware looked like when it first came out. This is from 2020. And your screen has a big notice on it. You've got a countdown timer. This is how much time you have left. And the pressure is on because all your files, all your personal files and data are encrypted, and you need to pay if you want that key to get them out. And of course, what makes it all this possible? We don't have to pretend anymore in order to get the payment. Of course, it's Bitcoin. So Bitcoin becomes a thing and more prevalent, and the ransomware guys can move into not pretending to be something else and to just extort you for money. So there's our evolutionary path, 2013 to 2022 and beyond, showing no sign of slowing down. We have crypto ransomware, or what we think of today as ransomware. Let me give you another reason or idea of why this evolution. I mean, we know we can make money this way, and we don't have to pretend to be somebody else, because we did some survey work and we found that only 3% of the people that got hit by one of these lockers actually paid a ransom, as opposed to in crypto, 34% of people did. Now, this is 2016. We did some surveys of end users and asked them if they had gotten ransomware, and if so, did they pay? Same with locker. You can see right here you're going to get paid a lot more because a lot more people are paying the ransom. And you can actually ask for a lot more money, right? Because you have taken people's personal files. Okay. This section I wanted to talk about, some of the ways that the bad guys try to create fear and also try to be helpful when they're running ransomware. And there's a lot of different people running this scam and this crime. and they've come up with lots of different ideas. If an idea works, everybody copies it. If somebody, because there are no copyrights on these, right? No, there's nobody that's going to sue you for doing exactly what they do. So good ideas actually get copied very quickly. Bad ideas kind of fade away and other things just kind of come and go. Let me show you a few examples. I mean, here's a typical warning message. Your files have been encrypted, and how many hours, how many days, hours, minutes, and even seconds until you will never get your files. You will never see your files alive again if you don't pay, right? Again, keeping kind of that pressure up. Maybe we can scare you too, though, right? If you put this scary clown on there, maybe people that are afraid of clowns, man, they're going to pay as soon as they can just to get this off their screen. Does this work? I think the guy that wrote this malware probably had a good chuckle and felt good about himself. I don't know that it was effective. We certainly haven't seen anybody copy and use angry clowns or scary clowns in their ransomware. This one was a really unusual idea. And it offered you an option. You could pay the ransom or you could restore your files the nasty way. And what it wanted was you needed to infect 2 other people. And if those 2 other people paid the ransom, they'd unencrypt your files for free. It's kind of like a pyramid scheme, or maybe Amway or something, right? Where you just need to bring other people in and then you won't profit, but you won't have to pay. So there would be a link included. You send that link to 2 other people. If they click on the link, infect themselves, and then pay, you're out. Maybe you send it to 15 or 20 or 100 people because, to get 2 of them to pay, you're doing all the work for the bad guy of spreading the malware, right? It's kind of crazy. We don't see a lot of this today. I think this was an interesting idea. It kind of faded away. All right, let's talk about kind of the idea, though, of Bitcoin. While some of us may be very comfortable with Bitcoin, I remember this a couple years ago, but also I always get, the mom example. My mom, to save her life, couldn't figure out how to do Bitcoin, right? So here is a typical one where it's good. You've got 4 days to pay. What's kind of interesting is if you don't pay her right away, it's going to go up in price, and then eventually you just will never get your files back. But I will rush you because you'll get a cheaper price if you pay quickly, right? Don't think about this, just pay me money. But here's the interesting one. Here's the part from my mom, right? Okay, I'm asking you to get Bitcoin. You got to do it very quickly. You may not know how. Well, here, Google how to buy Bitcoin, and you can figure it out. Okay, that's not going to work with my mom, right? That is absolutely not going to work. But it's an interesting try. Well, if that doesn't work, if that doesn't help, then what might? Well, what about if we offered technical support? So you can call somebody up, click on that link and have a chat session, and they'll help you through the whole process of buying Bitcoin. Isn't that nice? I mean, a lot of legitimate vendors, tech companies won't give you good technical support, but a ransomware guy will have callers standing by for you, right? Also, though, that gives you an idea of how profitable this is, that you can afford to have people there to chat with you, right? How much money they were making. All right. This is an actual conversation. I've put it into little bubbles, but this is somebody who got into one of these chat sessions, said, hey, I've got 2 computers that are infected. I've got the Bitcoin to pay for one of them, but it's going to take me a while to get the Bitcoin for the second one. I won't be able to make your deadline. Is there anything we can do? I know I only got 3 days. Hey, buddy, no problem. We'll just disable that deadline for you. Hey, pay as soon as you can, right? And once you do, we'd like you to leave a review. Here's a link where you can leave the review. And if you leave us a positive review of how good we were to do business with, how helpful, then we'll actually give you a refund. We'll send some of your money back, right? They're like trying to create a Yelp-like service within their ransomware business, right? So, the reason is if you make it look that it's easy to pay, you will get your files back, then people are more likely to pay, right? A lot of people wouldn't pay, and rightfully so, because some places you could give the guy your money, but you'd never get a key back. They didn't care. They already had your money, right? So they're trying to build a good reputation. So a lot of crazy stuff. Okay, let's look. How am I doing on time? Okay, let's talk about modern ransomware. That's the history. That's the past. Let's look at kind of where we are today. Well, I'm going to start in 2015, but I'm setting it up. In 2015, the average ransom paid by a consumer was $294. Hey, to me, you and me, that's pretty good money, right? Well, in 2016, this happened, highly publicized. I can remember I did a bunch of interviews on this because it was so unusual and unique. Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital in Hollywood, California, paid $17,000 in Bitcoin to a ransomware gang in order to unencrypt their files and get all their computers back and running. I'm not going to make a judgment here, but I will tell you this was the first. There may have been others, but this was the first highly publicized instance of a business paying. Within 2 weeks, we saw 2 hospitals in Germany get infected with ransomware and held up. Another one the week after that, and hospitals have been one of the major targets since. Kind of makes sense. You know, there's a hospital in England that had to shut down. They were taking people out in ambulances, stretchers, and then ambulances to other hospitals because all their systems were shut down. The pressure on a hospital to get up and running again is pretty incredible because lives are at stake, right? But if you're a bad guy and you want to maximize your profit, you're going, let's see, $200 and some dollars or 17,000. I wonder who I will try to get infected next, right? And this is really when targeted ransomware going after businesses started to take off. And the money is the main reason. But, you know, consumers started to get harder to get. More of them were on mobile devices, and we know there's problems on that, getting them to pay. Often their files are backed up in the cloud, and those files, there's an emotional cost, but there's very rarely a financial cost to losing your files. And you're really, at the end of the day, you're making a budget decision or a moral decision. Do I give money to bad guys? Or, you know, do I have the money to get those files back? And if I don't have it, I just don't have it, and I just lose those files. We're businesses, we know they're mainly using Windows. I only have to write my malware once, it works everywhere. We have found, even today, many of them don't have their files backed up. They may think they do, and they've got a whole program and policy in place for backup. And then when they actually have to restore something, they find there's gaps, or they've forgotten something critical and they didn't back it up. And at the end of the day, they're making a business decision on whether to pay or not. It's not a moral decision. And it's not a budget, it's a business decision. Let me explain that in 2 headlines here. One company paid $11 million to hackers after a ransomware attack. The Irish healthcare system, another hospital, did not pay. Good for them, but it's estimated it cost them $100 million to get everything up and running again, right? So if you have somebody who's only looking at the bottom line, pay or not pay, it may be cheaper to pay. And that's so you are more likely to get paid by a business than a consumer, right? So there's the change. So by 2016, about 69% of all attacks were against consumers. That's the year of Hollywood Presbyterian. Goes down to 2017 to 41%. We get to 19% in 2018. And I don't know what that looks like to you, but it looks like this to me. This is threats that are directed towards businesses from now on. Now, it's still happening in consumer. I'll show you some additional numbers, but it's just not as much. So here's 2017. In 2017, there's actually only one gang that was targeting businesses. All of a sudden in 2018, overall ransomware attacks went down by 20%, but enterprise ransomware attacks went up. 2019, it continues to go up. And the 2021 number, from January to December, it went up 200%, right? Overall ransomware attacks are down because they're not a whole bunch of individuals. They're concentrated on a few very large businesses. Why large businesses? Well, they can afford to pay a bigger ransom. And the attackers actually know who they're targeting, and they know what their revenues are, because they're not going to waste their time on a business that's only $1 million a year because they can't pay a multi-million-dollar ransom, right? So targeted is really a key word here in terms of ransomware today. Here's a look in last year, all ransomware attacks, and you can see it's pretty spread out through a number of countries. USA, we're number one, right? But we're not alone up there, right? China, India, South Africa, and so on. Let's look at targeted, where we continue to see the increases, right? It's the US. It's US because there's a lot of large businesses that can pay large ransoms. Now, you also see predominance of first world countries, English. So you can write ransomware in English. It'll work in a lot of different countries. These are also countries that have large businesses that you can extort that much money. There's a couple oddballs there, right? Like Barbados. I mean, there's probably a lot of English down there, but I don't think of them as having a lot of multi-million-dollar corporations. But they do have companies that do business down there or have offices down there. So as part of an attack against a US company or UK company, the Barbados office gets infected as well. And I also have a lot of financial firms down, right, that have things down there. So, you know, nothing is hard and fast, but basically you're looking at first world countries where English is first language are predominantly those that are targeted. All right, let's look at the software itself. Let's look at malware, the ransomware malware, right? I'm going to take you back a little bit. Some of the guys or gals, whoever behind this stuff in the beginning, had another epic fail, and this was in their attack chain. Basically, either phishing or with a website, a drive-by download, a user go to their website, a vulnerability would be exploited. They'd be able to dump the ransomware on the machine. Or it's in an email, they click on the attachment, right? It gets on the machine, the ransomware is installed, and the key to encrypt is included in the ransomware. Boom, they've encrypted all the files. Now, for a security company like us, where we can take apart that malware, we can find that encryption key pretty quickly since it's in the malware. And so you just give it to the company and they can unencrypt all their files. Another epic fail. But one thing is they do learn from their failures. So the started to do is say, well, okay, we'll infect the malware, but we're actually going to keep the key on a command and control server out on the web, a server that we own or that we own. Yeah, that we own. They don't own it physically, but they have control of it, right? And that's where the key is, and we do the encryption there. So now you can look through that malware all you want. You're not going to find the encryption key because it's not in the software. And this becomes the foundation of all ransomware moving forward. Still, this is pretty simple, right? This is what a ransomware attack looks like today. Actually, most targeted attacks, whether ransomware or not, look like this. It is a combination of tens or 20s of different steps. It's all broken down into little pieces in order to make it harder to find, right? If I send down a 10 megabyte file that is a piece of ransomware, it's easy to see, right? And the security products will find it and stop it. But what if we send a zip file down? I mean, users are using zip files all the time. And if we want to see it, then we actually have to get into that zip file. And what if inside that zip file, there's actually the malware is not there as we used to do, but there's a little JavaScript. And what does that JavaScript do? Well, all it does is execute a file. Okay, well, so far, nothing that's really particularly you can identify as malicious. Well, it just goes on and on like that. In fact, all these are tools that reside on a Windows operating system. So they're already sitting on their operating system, and IT uses these tools to do the work on a machine, on a Windows machine, to remotely manage that machine. So you can't see PowerShell or WScript being executed and say, well, that's malware. Well, it's probably not. In fact, I'll give you a stat on that in a minute. Cobalt Strike is a red team tool used to find vulnerabilities in attack systems when red teams are working inside an organization. The bad guys use it too. Dual use tool. It depends on who's using it, whether it's bad or not, right? And here's a bunch of commands being executed that everybody executes on a Windows machine. It's just not unusual. Net stop. Yeah. Okay, well, they stop something for malicious purposes, but you've got to know what they're doing or why to know whether it's malicious or not. And in fact, they may do something like delete your backup. Well, there could be a legitimate reason the backup's being deleted. They're disabling Microsoft Defender, which is Microsoft's antivirus product. They're turning it off. Well, there may be a good reason you're turning it off if you're doing IT is doing some work. So again, you have to know the context of this in order to understand whether it's malware or not. In fact, There's only one piece of malware on there, and that's this piece where the ransomware itself. And I'm going to show you a technique in a minute to why that's even, they're trying to make that as hard as possible to catch as well. We'll get back to that. But first, I want to talk about these red circles. They're what we call living off the land, or LOTL. And we've been talking about this at Symantec for a while now, written several reports on it. It's essentially saying, well, let me see, do I have, let me give you an example of what some of these are. These are common tools that IT uses, but the bad guys using as well. And here's a list of some of the most prevalent ones that we've seen used in ransomware attacks. Number one, PS exec. Then you got Cobalt Strike and Mimikatz, which red teams use, bad guys use, and then a whole bunch of other things that are just normal commands that get run on an operating system, just being used malicious purposes. This was first started several years ago, and it was really hard to say if something was bad or good, because only about 1% of all the times one of these files were executed was it being used maliciously. Now that's jumped almost 20%, 1 in 5, right? That's certainly say, well, there's a lot of them to see, but you still have a 1 in 5 chance of, you have a 4 in 5 chance of stopping a legitimate action from taking place, shutting down a business because you think it's malicious, right? And I can tell you that businesses do not like their systems getting shut down by their security vendors, right? It's a great way to lose money when you stop a computer from doing what it's supposed to do, because if the people behind it are doing real work, right? If it's not a bad guy. So you have to be very careful, and that makes it harder to detect them, which is the bad guy's purpose, right? All right, here's an analogy, kind of a way to think about it. Look, is this ladder a threat? I mean, is this ladder, dangerous? I mean, from a security standpoint, and the answer is, no, that's ridiculous, right? Obviously, no. Well, what if it's leaning against the house like this? Well, again, it's how it's being used. If painter put it there and he's painting the house, that's pretty legitimate use. If a bad guy has put it there so he can walk in is taking your ladder, right? That maybe even the painter put it there, but he's using it to break in through the second story, then that's a threat. And so this is what really makes all this difficult and really hard. But here's the flip side. When you have 20 or 30 pieces, really small little pieces broken up, it's harder to detect, but you only have to find one of those 20 to 30 pieces in order to stop the threat. So us as the good guys have an advantage, is there's more things for us to find, right? And we've gotten very good at finding them and then figuring out all the pieces. We know what the thing we find, we know there's a parent process, something that executed. So we can then go and find that, move our way up or down the attack chain and get rid of things. So it's not all doom and gloom, okay? We've actually given us an advantage in many ways. Okay. Here's an example from that SamSam group, one of the first to do targeted attacks. This is a look at one of their attacks. I told you there's only one piece of malware, right? If immediately you get on a client and you download that malware, well, that's the easiest thing to find, right? And so if we can find that right away, we can shut this whole thing off. Let's see what the SamSam guys do. This is 2018, back in February of that year. They find one machine and they get some hack tools on it. They've got their grips, their footprint in the organization. And then they're going to wait 10 minutes once they're on that machine, and they begin checking the machine using PS Info and running Mimikatz, trying to get passwords. So PS Info, standard tool, nothing malicious about running it. You don't know who's running it. You can assume IT is. Mimikatz, again, maybe it's a red team, right? So you don't know at this point, right? Nothing obvious to catch them on. They wait again. They're 2 days. They've gathered a bunch of passwords around the network on different machines, and then they don't do anything. They just kind of wait. They're kind of waiting to see if they get caught, right? Haven't been caught in 2 days. They send down 2 different versions of their malware. It's a belts and suspenders. What if the security vendor who's on that machine can catch one of those, but not the other? Right? Maybe they don't catch either. Maybe they catch both, but I am doubling my chances of being successful. The security vendor goes, hey, I found this ransomware and I got it off your machine. Everything's good. Life is beautiful. Not really, because there's still another one on there that you didn't know about, right? And now they're on there and they're waiting again. It's been downloaded. They wait an hour. They assure that at least one of them is still there. And now they go attacking all the other machines in the network, or as many as they can, so that they don't have now one machine, but they have a whole bunch of machines. In fact, in this case, let's see what 5 hours later, running this attack across the network with PSExec, a legitimate tool, they've got 248 machines infected. This can be a significant blow to any organization, that many machines, right? So again, minimizing the chances of getting caught and then hitting them hard. And that's a modern targeted attack today.
Sweet. So
you know what though? Given all that and all that evolution, also they're getting on with vulnerabilities. Are you still there?
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you early. Do you guys have any questions for Randy? I know he had a very interesting topic going down from the history to contemporary. I guess one of the questions I had is, it just seems that you said overall ransomware has kind of was it ransomware, or you said that certain ransomware has gone down because people aren't focusing on big? That was something you said earlier, right?
So yeah, so the number of attacks has gone down dramatically. Very few end users get attacked anymore. And most of the attacks are against very large businesses. So if you count pure numbers of attacks, that number is smaller than it was when end users were getting attacked. But the number of companies getting attacked actually has gone up. Now, that company that we just looked at got 248 machines. We would only count that as one attack. It was against one company, right? But there were a large number of machines.
Right.
So target attacks up, overall ransomware down, because there's less businesses than individuals.
I also found it interesting how overall ransomware got more narrower. Instead of just the individual, it's more actually just targeted. It shows one of your slides. Ransom attacks have gone down, but they're more targeted, very more focused on bigger businesses. And I think it's very interesting. The last time I remember I encountered a ransomware attack was back in 2013. The exact same one about the FBI regarding like what I've been viewing on the internet and how the FBI is alerted about my search history or something like that. I just found it interesting.
Yeah, the first time in history that the FBI, the Justice Department, and the Department of Homeland Security have all agreed on one thing, and it's that you need to be arrested for having.
Oh, did Kevin freeze a little?
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. But yeah, so the time that exhausts our time for this session. I see the speaker disconnected. He had a connection.
He's back.
Oh.
I'm back.
Yeah, so thank you to Kevin Haley from Broadcom for talking about the history of ransomware, how it got started, failed, and then evolved, eventually becoming the threat we deal with today. We look forward to maybe having you next year. You've been great to work with. Guys, if you want to, you have a 15-minute break before our next session. You'll have more options to choose from. And thanks again, Kevin.
You bet. My pleasure.